Ooh-wee. Okay. All right, I'm like 10 minutes late, but it's all good here. Just getting finalized, things set up. But I'm gonna actually go and start some 10 minutes late, and I know, and folks will come when they come. If they come, otherwise, you'll be able to see this on my profile. Um, Really cool. So I'm on IG Live as well as YouTube Live, so you can catch me in either space. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for watching this whenever you're watching it. And welcome. I'm Nayo, the founder of EcoWelco. And a couple of things that I'll announce before I kind of get into today's topic, which highlights how vulnerability is a gift. And first things first is that like I am going to be migrating more and more and more over to Patreon. So you can find me there. There's a link in my bio, in my link tree. So it's Patreon/EcoWelco. You can sign up for membership there starting for as low as $5 a month. The podcast, when the Meditation Matters podcast, is will be primarily there on Patreon, as well as a lot of the additional and extra episodes that I'm curating for season three's drop. I'm actually really excited for that. There's been a lot of work going on in the backgrounds to really make that a reality. So I'm super, super excited to provide that for you all. I know there's been a bit of a lag between dropping this next season, but it's been for a good reason. I have really a lot of great guests that I've been featuring on the podcast that I'm super excited to bring to you all. So yay. um, cool. So that's Patreon. That's the podcast, Meditation Matters podcast. Again, you can find that on any streaming platform. If you would like to listen to everything I've already created, check me out there. You can also find that in the link in my bio. And other cool things are coming as well. I will allow this to show itself when it does. Also, so far, some programs that are currently available to help with getting in the present moment or experiencing presence in the present, experiencing presence in the present moment, right? So being here and now. Or practicing a little bit more mindfulness, however it is that you like to reference it, that's available on my website. You can find that www.ecowellco.com. Also, check the link in my bio through the link tree if you would like to check out the first part of the presencing program, practicing presencing program that will really guide you through some various audio uploads that you can download and keep forever that are used to help you understand how to use your mind and your breath. Two tools that you naturally have on how to bring yourself into the present moment. These are all various parts of a wellness practice. So I use meditation, guided meditation, somatic healing practices, energy healing practices, and some metaphysical things to help bring myself into the present moment that I find is super viable to share with you all and all of our healing journeys. Okay. So just so that I'm looking both here and Instagram and at YouTube, I will be turning my head a bit here. But okay, so getting into vulnerability. So I know that this is a topic um, that is interesting, right? Because we can use of allowing ourselves to express ourselves, to allowing ourselves to actually express ourselves in a way that is important for us, right? So allow ourselves to express our emotions, admitting we're wrong, sharing traumas or painful memories that really help us to heal through them or past them, or to properly better build a better relationship with past experiences. Being able to actively voice our needs. I know recently folks were dragging Jada because they were like, I guess because however it was perceived from her recent Red Table Talk, where she was talking about sex life and stuff like that, and how it's been relatively difficult for her over the years to accurately express what she wants in the bedroom with Will. Um, Folks dragged her for that because I guess they misunderstood it as something completely different, that she had a bad sex life with him. But pretty much what she was saying was that it had been hard for her over the years to properly express what she wants in the bedroom. And this is actually something that a lot of us experience when it comes to expressing what we want in the bedroom, or what we want from other dating and relationship situations, or even understanding ourselves. So we can look at this so many ways. And it's not just about romantic relationships, also. This is something, vulnerability can be extremely powerful and something that we can do in familial and platonic and even work relationships, as well as we need to share information. So, really, this session is going to be about understanding the power of vulnerability and how it truly is a gift and something that we should be more open to including in our daily lives. Now, there's another way that we may experience vulnerability being used in context, and this can be often seen in academia, for example. So I come from a environmental science and urban planning background where a lot of times we're studying vulnerable populations that are going to be impacted more significantly, for example, by climate change than another population who may have more resources, more privileges, and more security financially, whatever it may be. Vulnerable populations oftentimes are saying that these populations are unarmed, they are unsafe, unguarded. These are populations that may be at a greater risk, endangered, in jeopardy of something. So they may um, be in danger or may be harmed more readily than something else. So these is what. So another way that you can also think of this is in terms of war or conflict. For example, you can have a population that's more vulnerable than another, that's more susceptible to being harmed by the consequences of war or whatever it may be. Examples of these type of vulnerable populations can be, for example, elderly populations, children, women, minorities, marginalized populations that were intentionally placed away from the necessary resources they needed. And the list can really go on. Populations that also don't have access to the proper tools to protect themselves, especially in times of conflict when it's specifically directed at them. So these are different ways that we can hear the word vulnerable, vulnerability, and vulnerable populations. So for the particulars of this video, talking about vulnerability as a gift, we're talking about more so in the mental, emotional, spiritual space. Okay. Um, Not so much physical vulnerability, although this is something that can also be grouped in when we're talking about how do we build a stronger bond with what it means to be vulnerable or to practice vulnerability. But for the aspects of mostly of this video, like I mentioned, it's going to be mainly about the mental, emotional, and spiritual spaces as it relates to vulnerability. So to go ahead and get into it, what it means to be vulnerable, let's give you a textbook definition, okay? Textbook definition is going to be kind of intense, right? So here I'll read it off for you. It's susceptible to physical, emotional attack or harm. And it's really interesting because sometimes relationships can feel like they can be harmful. Um, but in truth, a lot of the times practicing vulnerability or learning to be more vulnerable, especially with ourselves or in other relationships, may not actually be as harmful as we make them out to be, but they could also be at the same time. And another thing I would like to say when it comes to practicing vulnerability and being vulnerable, there is no giving away of your power to somebody else by speaking your truth, saying what it is that you need to say, or expressing a difficult emotion to the person that you feel is important to express it to. You are not giving your power away in doing this. You're actually being extremely powerful in doing so. You're actually giving yourself the opportunity to greatly step into a significant power that perhaps you may have never thought was a reality before. Um, so it's not a weakness. And a lot of times in our societies, we can believe that vulnerability or allowing ourselves to speak, authentically how we need to express ourselves authentically in relationships that we find ourselves in can put us in a weak point of view. To say off is going could put us in a weak and mentally weak that can be helps us to actually live our lives more truly to who we are and how we feel about it, and helps us to feel actually lead more a life of better well-being, incorporate more wellness, actually better understand what it is that we may need in our lives to lead more well lives. That can help us, introduce ourselves to the fact that maybe perhaps I do need a therapist, that maybe perhaps I maybe practicing yoga and starting someplace small might be useful for me. Maybe exploring qigong, for example, might be something really interesting for me. This is something that, like, when we allow ourselves to actually be honest, I'm going to use that in tandem with vulnerability here. When we allow ourselves to be honest, we at the same time also allow ourselves to better know ourselves and to better figure out where it is that what where we might need help. And it's okay to ask for help, especially when we know that we need it. And another thing I'll say here about therapy too is one thing that's really cool about therapy, it's getting that third party assistance to help you navigate through mental, emotional, even spiritual things that you may be struggling with. It's also cool to have a therapist even when you're not struggling too. So perhaps you could also have one when you're maybe not super down bad, but you're maybe just a check-in. It could be like a yearly check-in and every other month type check-in with a therapist that you're able to have or maintain depending on the resources that you have, which by the way, there are plenty of resources. So I do recommend, no matter if you have access to insurance or not, or if you have if you're unemployed or low in income, there are a lot of online resources that are available for reduced rates. And there's also therapists, depending on your region, that will also do pro bono. So recently, when I was doing some research, I found some therapists that were offering up to 10 pro bono rates. That's here in the state of Maryland. So I don't know where you're located in, but just so you know, there's lots of resources to get tapped in to connect with a therapist to help you through whatever it is that you may be going through. And it's important to even make that first decision or that first recognition that, hey, perhaps some help could be useful for me. And that takes some honesty, which is going to be some vulnerability. Oh, beautiful. Welcome from Germany. Hi. It's so nice to have you here. Thank you so much for joining. Um, but yeah, so a couple of more things. So I kind of wanted to take a bit of time and talk about my own personal experience with vulnerability. And yeah, so here I run EcoWelco, right? So this is a space, a wellness space where we're learning how to learn to like ourselves and treat ourselves better ultimately, but also merging that with understanding what's going on in in our external environment. And one thing that I've currently struggled with over the year is actually being vulnerable. As much as I like to talk about how important it is to be vulnerable and how important it is in our wellness journey, I personally have struggled with allowing myself to allow others to really see me for who I am and for allow myself to express myself authentically in all spaces that I show up in. Um, I've struggled a lot previously with feelings of being rejected or abandoned, not really being understood or heard, and just feeling like the true me can never really be handled or never really be like again accepted, right? So we're dealing with a lot of those feelings that I had personal experience with. So I often chose not to be completely forthcoming with people or to not completely be myself, to give the world a filtered version of myself because I felt like that was going to be more digestible or bearable, or I would better fit in or be less judged, or maybe not be rejected by a lover, for example, or maybe a friend wouldn't leave me. But what's so interesting about these thoughts and these previous actions that I was doing, they oftentimes keep you in relationships, places, even places including maybe even jobs, living situations, whatever it may be, that ultimately are not serving for you because you're doing things based on a facade. You're doing things based on how you believe that they should be done, based on what other people may or may not accept from you. But in truth, you showing up in yourself as your most authentic version, even learning how to do that bit by bit, is the best way to live. I'm learning that. And that's been one of the best things that I recently did that I've been discovering. And it's like kind of like an unfolding for me, honestly. I have periods where I'm like super vulnerable and super honest with people. And then I have periods where I'm like, I don't know, because something happened. I didn't like the way that I felt. But the reality is that like there is no place to hide from yourself. We can think that there could be a place to hide from ourselves, from how we really feel, from what we really need. But there is no place to hide. Like, I feel like I'm another good example for that too, because before, so I graduated from my master's program back in 2018, and then I felt super trapped in where I was. I was like, oh, like this is the place where I had so much pain. I must leave Maryland. So I went and I left to Philadelphia, which is about an hour, about 2.5 hours from the District of Columbia and the capital, and then it's about an hour and a half from New York City. So kind of in the middle there. And so I went and I decided to leave the suburban lifestyle and I went to go live in a city. I thought that that was going to cure all my problems by being in the new space where I had to establish myself as a person, explore who I was. I got a new job and I was just doing all these different things that I thought was important for me. And lo and behold, all the mental and emotional feelings and discomforts and difficulties that I was dealing with in Maryland, oh yeah, I was dealing with them in Philadelphia as well. And that's the thing. There is no running from yourself. There is no avoiding yourself. There is no like escaping. The things that we may ignore or avoid or try to suppress, they come back to us. They show they peek their heads up from the shadow in different ways because they want to be heard and seen. They want to be addressed. They want to be welcomed into the collective table where we seem to welcome in all the other parts of ourselves, right? But that's one of the beauties of vulnerability. This is why I titled this Vulnerability as a Gift, right? Because when we allow ourselves to be open and honest to just starting with ourselves, I'm not even broaching into the other categories that are dealing with other people, but just starting with ourselves, we have the opportunity to really like learn what it is that we need, learn what within ourselves needs attention, needs some extra loving, needs some acceptance, needs the option to come and sit at the table with us, needs the opportunity to actually be released from us so that we can keep going forward. And this is where we get into shadow work. Oh, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of shadow work. It's pretty much acknowledging and healing the parts of the selves that we may have put into the shadows of our being, the shadows, right? So that could be the places that we intentionally don't like to address, we don't like to entertain. These could be the parts of ourselves that maybe we've dealt with a lot of aggression or anger issues before. And we're like, well, in order for me to be, let's say, historically as a child, let's say you had some anger issues as a kid, or even, in double digits, who knows? And there was something that wasn't people didn't like about you, right? And so you're like, well, in order for me to be accepted or survive in this dynamic, then I have to, then I need to put that side of me away. I need to suppress it. So that side of you gets suppressed and put into the shadow realm of the self. It doesn't mean that it would ever went away. It just now is suppressed in the shadow self. So eventually, with time, though, if you can really sit and allow yourself to think about it, it may pick its head up every once in a while and show itself. And then you're like, oh, geez, no, 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 go back. So now you're super ashamed. You feel like you just, it can cause a lot of frantic energy and anxiety within you, possibly even stress. Or even maybe sadness and depression because you're like, oh, I thought I dealt with that year. I thought I dealt with that version of myself years ago. Now they're showing their head. The interesting part about it, though, is that the vulnerability aspect that we can practice with ourselves, we can go into that shadow realm where maybe the angry side of us lives, maybe the creative side of us lives, maybe the sad side of us lives, maybe the side of us that's been waiting to peek out for the longest lives. And they've shown themselves throughout time, but by taking a moment to sit and say, you know what, what's up? What do I need? Where might I still be struggling? What parts of me might still need a little bit of attention, a little bit of awareness? And this is also where you could reach out to a therapist and seek help, or you could begin to engage in energy healing practices. And you can, again, engage a third party person, whether that be a Reiki professional, a Qigong master, or anybody else that may be, or even learn some of these healing practices on your own. And that can also be your own transformational healing experience within yourself. But this is where you can really begin to tap into these spaces to better learn yourself, to better heal yourself, and to address the parts of you that have been wanting to be addressed. And that's the beauty of being vulnerable, right? So I'm not saying that these processes are going to be a walk in the park. They may be a little difficult and heavy and like really, really challenging. But that's the beauty. At the other side of that journey of going deep within yourself and learning more about your emotional needs and wants, the previous truths of yourself, the other side of that, you come out as like this being that you possibly previously never thought that you could be. And it really just started from you allowing yourself to be more honest and vulnerable with your truth, with everything that may be hidden from within you, with what the younger version of you may have needed or wanted from somebody else. But now you have the option to choose to give that to yourself. So, hello, I see more. Someone else have joined. Hello and welcome. Um, so I'm just talking about vulnerability being a really important gift for us to partake in for ourselves, as well as it relates to personal, professional relationships, and as we move throughout this world, and how important it is for us to learn how that how important it is to practice as we learn to better get in touch with our most authentic voice and authentic form of expression. These are things that I've definitely been exploring within myself. So far, I kind of spoke a little bit of my journey with that, but overall, like over my period of learning to be more vulnerable with myself and especially with others, that like so I just spoke a lot about being vulnerable with the self, and when it comes up to being vulnerable with others, that can be even possibly more challenging than it is to be vulnerable with the self. I eventually had gotten to a point where I was so brutally honest with myself, and I was willing and able to sit with myself for however long I needed. But then when it came to communicating what I needed to other people, or expressing what I was going through emotionally, or maybe that I needed maybe a little bit more support this time, or just reaching out and asking for help, that became 10 times harder than it was for me to sit with myself and be like, I got this. I'm doing it all by myself. Because, yes, ultimately, it's really, really important to be able to learn to build practices where you can better manage emotional fluctuations, the chatter in the head, or just anything that needs to be addressed, which I talked about previously being the shadow self, right? And just bringing those various parts of you to the table. Now, when I was mine just so happened to be I had a hard time with expressing myself. Some of us, maybe we didn't have a hard time expressing ourselves throughout our lives. So maybe we may not relate to this part. But I will say that being vulnerable and being honest with the self also now begs us to be honest with others and allow them to know us for standing in your truth, to standing in knowing who you are, to you speaking the most authentic of you into your reality. How people perceive and react to that, that's just how they perceive and react to it. One of my favorite things from Stoicism is learning that we cannot control other people's reactions. Shoot, there's even a lot of reactions within our own body, like in terms of the biological processes that go on that sometimes we cannot control, or we kind of can control them, but that takes a lot of study and practice to be able to really divert attention to those areas. But if we're just operating on day to day, swallow. No, I'm not always telling myself to swallow. It's just something I'm swallowing when I need to swallow. That's something that arguably can be out of my control, right? So when it comes though to connecting with others and sharing our true selves and allowing our true selves to be heard and seen in these spaces as it does with other people, we can control how we present ourselves. We can control how we react to situations. We can control our emotional responses. We can definitely learn to be better managers and controllers of those things. But what we cannot control is whether or not people accept us after we've decided to be ourselves. What we can control is how people perceive the things that we say. And what we can't control is how they then react to whatever it is that we've presented to them. And that's okay. And that's totally okay. And it can be really hard to be okay with that, but it is okay that that's our reality. And I know I've personally struggled with that concept, which is why it was kind of really hard for me to be cool with like no longer giving people filtered versions of myself and actually going to people and say, hey, like, do you have a moment, or do you have the mental and emotional capacity right now to listen to me because I need to talk, like, or for whatever else it may be. But we can't control the people, but we can control ourselves, and we can choose to learn what our needs are, what our emotional needs might be, how we may need help and assistance, what it is that what do we want, what are our goals, and what parts of ourselves may be hindering the parts of us that have all these goals and want to achieve all our goals, but we seem to be having a hard time not to. That's where again that brutal honesty, which I'm going to be calling ability, comes into play. In order for us to know who we are and to know what we want, we need to know why. And sometimes I like to do this practice sometimes, which is like five whys. And so what happens is you ask yourself why five different times. So you can say, okay, I want to be more creative. Let's just say hypothetically. I want to be more creative. Okay, great. Why? And then I can say why because I don't know. I just want to create more things. And then I say, okay, well, why do you want to create more things? Well, it makes me I want to be able to sell things that I create. Okay, why do you want to sell things that you create? I don't know. So you see, you could just keep going. Why? The point of the exercise, though, is to really get to the nitty gritty of your why. You can ask this for anything that you may want, in your life or anything that may you even may need possibly, to have a better understanding of why it is that you may want or need it, why something may be a goal for you. And this is ideally to strip away the first couple of layers that may be like facades. They may be like things that like perhaps we want them because somebody else told us that we want them, or maybe it's because this is what we think will make us a ton of money, or maybe it's because of whatever it may be. But ultimately, when we get hopefully to that last why that we feel comfortable asking ourselves, we get to like, I want it because I want to feel more at ease. I want to express myself more. It feels good when I create, or creating brings me some form of joy, or I feel like I can connect with others more easily when I'm creating, or I feel like I can create with source energy more easily when I'm in a creative state. Whatever it may be, like these are the reasons why vulnerability and practicing honesty with the self is so important, because we get to know who we really are. And once we get to know who we really are, we can then give a more full, we can actually present the full and complete versions of ourselves to the world. And again, whether or not the world accepts that, it's fine. There's always going to be people out there that will begin to gravitate to you as you begin to exist in your unique essence and that aura, that frequency that's fuller, more vibrant, more healed, because you've decided to get to know yourself in a very vulnerable but very loving way. And again, the journey of vulnerability about expressing your needs, knowing what your wants are, sharing and understanding painful and traumatic memories, seeking help as you may need to seek help, all of understanding our thought patterns and our beliefs and possibly even where they may come from. Like all these things lead to a greater state of well being, a greater practice of understanding that we actually can be well in our daily lives, no matter how hectic our lives may be, no matter how people perceive us, no matter what I may be going through right now, no matter what my circumstance may be. I can always stand strong in myself, and I can always heal and begin to transcend anything that I thought was defining me, any past like negative behavior or ideal or thought that I thought was me. I'm beginning to realize that by practicing vulnerability and by seeking help, or by just giving myself the love and attention that I need, the gentleness in this journey, that I'm not that thing that I thought I was. I'm actually this, and that can be the complete opposite of what that thing was. So for me, I used to think that I honestly just was just never really going to be accepted at all. I always felt like the black sheep. When I was growing up, I always felt like the black sheep in school and everything that I ever did, the ways that I expressed myself, the things that I like to do, the ways that I dress, like just I always felt like I was just always going to be the all one out, and no one was ever really going to truly ever accept me. Um, but it's crazy because that's not true. There will always be that group gravitate to you because you're walking in your truth and words. It really does. A lot of times, and sometimes it may almost seem like a pause, or people might be taking, and that could be from just one person in the room. And that could be because maybe that one person filled themselves, and maybe they just came in like, they just coming in, they have no general intention other than to be a part of whatever's going on in that room. But perhaps maybe they've done some work, or they feel whole in themselves. They feel like they can trust themselves. They feel like they can be there for themselves, or they feel like they are okay with asking for help or for seeking whatever it is that they may need to seek. But they know that when they do that, they're not necessarily, again, powerless or weak or giving away their power, but it's more so, hey, this is what I need in the moment, and I'm accepting that this is what I need in the moment, and that's fine. Those people walking in the room and their aura is strong. Their aura is filled with just truth and essence and pure love, and just like it's transformative. And this is why healing is so important. Healing ourselves and seeking help in our healing journey as we need to, from the tools that are really going to help us heal. Okay, because we can seek help from tools that won't actually help us heal. Just to be honest here. But if we decide to open ourselves up to tools that will actually help us heal and create a better sense of well being and practices of wellness within our life, then our aura will certainly change. Who we attract to ourselves will change. We may be begged and asked as we're transitioning from just inklings or notions or feelings that we may need to exit certain situations or remove ourselves from certain places, and that's always okay. But ultimately, when we decide to look at the practice of vulnerability and being vulnerable with ourselves as a gift and even being vulnerable with others as a gift, we will begin to experience profound healing that perhaps we may have never experienced before. And that is one of the greatest gifts that we ever have, and that we are now standing even more firmly in ourselves and in our truth. We're able to have a better idea of what it is that we need, maybe our purpose, our path. Maybe we begin to get ideas or inklings about shifting careers, maybe, or maybe we begin to form new confidence about speaking to that person on the other side of the room that maybe perhaps before we would have never done it because that's scary. Because oh gosh, they would know that maybe I'm possibly interested at all. What would I do with that? You see, there's a shift overall in the confidence within the self and the security within the self when you begin to explore what it's like to be more vulnerable with yourself. And as that begins to pour out of you into others. And perhaps there's going to always be those energies out there that are going to be curious about this healing energy that you're now giving off. And you may have people that what we call energy vampires that may kind of want to zap some of what you got. That's the other cool part about vulnerability here is that as you are on your vulnerability journey, your aura not only cleanses, but it also strengthens. And this is where setting boundaries becomes even more important. So, setting boundaries, I've actually written about this before. You can use a link in my bio at the end if you want to see a lot more of my writings around a lot of these different topics. But I wrote previously about how boundaries is a part of a self care and a wellness journey. And if we don't know how to set boundaries and not only set, but also uphold them, and we can uphold them gently, gracefully, however it is that we want to, if we have a hard time with setting boundaries, then that practice of vulnerability and getting to know what it is that we really need on the inside, super, super helpful. Once we begin to set boundaries and uphold them, we begin to see that, like, wow, okay, some issues or relationships or traumas or to be traumatic situations or relationships that could have happened previously or that have happened previously in my life, they're no longer happening because you're like, whoa, you kind of violation here. I don't like how violation feels, so I'm going to just remove myself, or I'm going to say that was a violation, or I'm going to say how I need to say, like, oh, hey, like, I actually am not interested in it. Or I didn't like how that felt, or you actually like I have a boundary around this, and I would ask if you could respect it, whatever it may be. And the write up that I did around boundaries, I kind of have like some examples of how you can voice it, so that like even if you're kind of nervous about doing those types of things, but these can be really, really powerful in protecting your energy and protecting your space and furthering you even more down your healing journey. And also, it can take some vulnerability to tell people straight up, like, hey, you violated my boundary. But that's what we call honesty. And that's that form of honesty and authenticity that is honestly, I'm going to say it, required of us to not only lead moral lives in a state of greater lives in a greater state of well-being, but to just lead more authentic lives and to attract the most authentic relationships and situations and opportunities within our lives that are most aligning to our true selves. It's super, super easy to get caught up in what we think we're supposed to be doing in this world based on what society or our communities, our guardians, friends, whatever it may be, have told us, or even how we've perceived this information. But when we begin to build a greater bond within ourselves by beginning to practice vulnerability, we have a better understanding of what our true unique path really is. And we begin to better understand any inklings or nudges or understandings or ideas that may come on how we can better live in our path of least resistance. So that's going to be our path where we feel like we can flow more easily and more gradually in. So that's gonna be vulnerability, and it's a task, I'm not gonna hold you. It's if you're not used to doing it, it can take some time with getting used to, but like with any habit, with anything that we're really trying to embody within ourselves that we know that would be really good for us, especially like vulnerability, like something that I've learned to slowly but surely allow myself to be a little bit more vulnerable here, or to tell this person, hey, like this is how I'm feeling, this is my truth here, or to actually follow that little inkling, say, okay, where's that going to lead me, or to actually sit and be honest with myself. Like, it takes little by little, especially if you're uncomfortable with it, but that's the journey and the value of the journey. And as you practice it more and more and more, you will begin to see just how much of a gift it really is, as I personally began to see myself. And I will say, even starting EcoWalko here, it took a great deal of vulnerability for me to even be in this space because it's such an arm of myself. Like, it's wow, like I really have to show up as myself in this space, and it's a really exciting place to be in to have to show up and to practice being vulnerable and showing up as myself in this space, especially as I'm leading this business. Um, but it definitely has allowed me to learn a lot more about myself, also to learn what it is that I like to do with my time, where I like to focus my attention, what I want and don't want to give my awareness to. So the journey of vulnerability, it can be difficult at first, but like I said, it takes 21 days. Science says, according to science, it takes about 21 days to build a habit. So if once we know that we perhaps want to be a little bit more vulnerable, it means because we can start with something as small as maybe we're in a relationship or a friendship or family, whatever that the relationship may be, and we want to actually practice saying how we feel versus holding it in. That can be something as small that you start with there, which actually is not small either. That's actually quite gigantic and amazing and deserves celebration, actually. Way. Um, or it could be something as small as you're noticing a bit of discomfort within yourself. You're feeling an emotion that's honestly quite familiar or even foreign. And you can say, what's this feeling? And or you can say, I give myself the opportunity to explore this feeling, to know what this feeling is, or to just let it go, or even just simply as acknowledging that you're even having a feeling. It could be something as small as like acknowledging, "Hey, I feel anxious right now." Okay. Or, "Hey, I feel sad right now." Okay. You can either decide to explore where the sadness came from, what triggered the anxiety, or you can say, "You know what? As the feeling came, it will also go." Just like clouds passing in the sky or you watching a movie from beginning to end, the movie ends at some point and you get to leave the theater. There might be some residual feelings, but eventually, yeah, you leave the theater and you left the theater and the movie's over. So, as we begin more and more to allow ourselves to be more in an observant space, especially while we're practicing and engaging in this practice of vulnerability, we begin to see that a lot of ideas or beliefs that we've had about ourselves really aren't necessarily true. They're just things that are happening, but we don't necessarily have to grip and attach ourselves so tightly to them. And again, it's practice, and it's one reason why I boost meditation so much, especially if you go through a lot of the writings that I've put up through the link in my bio. You see that meditation often finds itself in the headlines or at least in the recommendations of some of the things that I'm talking about because it really helps you to explore what it's like being in that observer state and also to connect with yourself on a deeper level that perhaps all the constant chatter and chaos of the mind or of the external world or scrolling through social media, whatever it may be, may cause us to kind of be a little frazzled sometimes. So meditation can really help to just settle out, maybe smooth out the roughness of the tides of the ocean waves, right? So if imagine we're one gigantic ocean, which we might as well be, since I guess we're like 80, 90% water at this point. I thought it was 70%. We're about 80% now. So we might as well all just be walking oceans. um, but yeah, so I think like you can start from anywhere that is most comfortable from you for you. And for me, one of my big places is just should have asking for what I want, expressing myself honestly, and exploring my thoughts and belief patterns. For you, it might be something different. I just encourage you to explore it and to check out some things that I've written before. And also, I will be in a later post providing a little bit more resources on where you can read up, begin to practice, and yeah, start your journey on getting to know yourself a bit more and how that will trickle over and even boost you. So yeah, so I don't know if anybody has any questions. Now's a good time to ask if you have any questions. If not, I will close out the session. And it's been really, really great and amazing to speak with everybody who wanted to join me here on this live. This was like my first wellness talk on just actually being really really real here. I've actually had a lot of nervousness around having a talk before. So, again, this is something where it's like, well, I know I want to do this, so I'm just going to do it. Right. So, again, I encourage all of us in some way, shape, or form, if there's anything that, any idea that we may have up here that we know we want to execute on, anything that we're so nervous or afraid about doing, and we just find all the reasons why not to do it, I encourage all of us to do it anyway. Like, fear can have a purpose. It's not all bad, especially like if we're trying to save our own lives, right? But that idea, like, is the might the idea harm us? I don't know. Like, it could, I don't know. But in some instances, it's good to allow ourselves to explore the idea. So, if anything, honor yourself, accept yourself where you are and how you are, and allow yourself to begin to discover your most authentic form of expression, your most authentic self, and your most authentic voice. Thanks so much for being here, and I will see you all next time in the next Wellness Talk. Bye.